Hi, this is Hunter from OpenFn, and today we'll be talking about adapter best practices and common patterns that we use whenever we build adapters. So to start off, we will be looking at this documentation, which is our wiki that can be found in the adapters repository inside OpenFn. In this documentation, it outlines some of the best practices that we use whenever we build an adapter and how to ensure that an adapter is usable and easy for other people to understand. If you do not know what an adapter is, you can click on this link to get started on learning what an adapter is and how do we build adapters. So basically, an adapter is a wrapper we build around APIs, and it is the middle item we have in between OpenFn and the platform that you want to talk to. Some of the things we look at when we create adapters include having an API design that will meet the needs that are required, also having a good documentation for the adapter, and creating functions that allow users to get the output required much faster and in an easy way. And the other thing is, how do we handle state whenever we build adapters? We'll start with API design. For the API design, you have to look at some of the functions that will be required for the API you're building. It is important for you to do research on the API you want to build an adapter around and figure out what type of functions would you need. For example, if you're building an OpenLMIS adapter, for what we did, we only have the get, post, put, and request. So these are basic HTTP functions, and the request that is used to make any HTTP call you would desire to this specific adapter. Some adapters would require different type of design, where we have specific functions that do a specific task. If you want to upload a file, instead of having a post that can do anything, including uploading a file, you make it strict and only focused on that specific item that you want it to do. For upload file, you only focus on uploading files. So this is a technique we use when we want to discover how should you build an adapter. Do you want it to focus on a specific task, or do you want it to have a get that will do any get request in this specific adapter? The other thing we look at is a technique for listing items. Sometimes you would want to list all patients or list a single patient. Instead of having a pattern where it is get patient or get patients, it gets a bit confusing for the users, and the new technique that you came up with is having get patient and list patients. The get and list are verbs that are easily understood. So if someone says get, they expect to only get a single item. If they see list, they expect to get multiple items. But if your API or your adapter requires you to list multiple items or in different resources, listing patients, listing users, listing products, instead of having many functions which focus on list patients and other functions on list products, it is recommended that you only have a list which will be listing any item you want. So this makes it easy and makes your code less bulky. The other technique that you use is, whenever you're creating functions, we look at operational or utility functions. Operational functions are functions that make the API request and do something in that adapter. If you want to get users, you'll have an operational function that is only for getting users. So operational functions are sit at the topmost section of your adapter, while utility functions are basic JavaScript helper functions that help you complete a certain task. An example is in DHIS2, we have a few helper functions and also utility functions. So here we have functions such as create, destroy, which are operational functions. They do something to the API. But we also have util functions, which are just basic JavaScript functions that help you do a certain task. The main difference is utility functions are always called inside an FN block, while operational functions are standalone functions. This, as you can see, this one is called inside a utility It's a utility function that's called inside an FN block, while a get is an operational function that is standalone. So the next thing is how we also handle state. Whenever you build your adapter, state is handled differently. The response that you get from your API, the body response is stored inside state.data, while anything else, the metadata, the headers, are stored inside state.response. For anything else, if you had a previous API call, it will be stored inside state.references. The output will be stored inside state.references and will be overridden if you make another call. The next section is namespacing. So namespacing is a technique where you separate the operational functions that you have depending on how they are working. So suppose you have the basic HTTP helpers for the post, get, put, delete, and you have specific opinionated functions such as get user or get file, load data. So instead of having all these together in one file, you create namespaced files, and in turn you have namespaced functions. If you have the get, post, put, which are basic HTTP helpers, you can put them inside a namespaced function called HTTP. So anyone using it will know this is a HTTP function being called. And if it is a util, you place it inside a namespaced file called util. So everything inside it will be referencing util, and a user will know this is just a utility function. An example again is DHIS2. In DHIS2, it has different namespaced functions. We have the HTTP functions, which focus on HTTP requests, the normal ones. We have tracker, which focuses on the tracker functions. And we have util, which only has utility functions to be used. And we have the normal operational functions, which are not inside namespaced files. So this is also helping you and to make other people understand we can have many more functions, but we're not going to make our adapter bulky in one file of these functions. Separating them into different namespaced functions make it easy to read, easy to figure out what is what, and it makes it a bit easier for other people to use the adapter. The final section is documentation. Whenever you build an adapter, it is advised you write a documentation for each function that is being built. Since each function performs a specific task, it is important to make it public and a function. This public key will be responsible for making it public on the documentation for people to be able to see it in the documentation. If this is missing, the documentation will not appear in the adapter docs or in the app itself. So it is recommended for you to add this function, this declaration of at public. The other thing about documentations is it is advised that each function should have an example. Having examples make it easy for any user to have an overview or an understanding of how this adapter works at a glance. So if you look at DHIS2, every function, if you look at get, it has examples. So whoever wants to use DHIS2 has an idea of how it works before they start writing code. And as engineers, we have a dev checklist that helps us know what things should we look out for whenever we are building adapters. And that is this file. So this file stipulates some of the things you look out for when you're building adapters. Does it have tests? Does it work as it's supposed to? Is there documentation? So it keeps us and allows us to always check and ensure we're using the same technique in all the adapters, just so it feels the same for all adapters. This is how we enforce best practices and common patterns when building adapters in OpenFn. Thank you.